Sanbanan Dumlang, hello, it is Simply Sfissa here, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast Simply Do the Work. Now, before we get into today's podcast episode, just get the housekeeping out of the way. If you like to subscribe, do subscribe, follow me on social media, because I'm sure you've seen this year, there is literally no schedule, there is no consistency. I'm literally just putting up podcast episodes whenever I feel I could, whenever they're ready. Like even this episode, as I'm recording, I don't really know when it's gonna be up because I kind of fell behind on my upload schedule around, I think it was September, when I was doing the obstetrics rotation, because I pre-recorded a bunch of episodes in July/August, and they were meant to come out in September, October, but there's so many episodes that still haven't come out as I'm recording this. But yeah, that is neither here nor there. Let us get into today's episode. So today's episode is titled, Why Even Call Yourself a Christian? Give me a moment, I want to adjust the mic quickly. Why even call yourself a Christian? So, first I want to talk about what is the inspiration behind this episode. So lately I've been hearing a lot of statistics, people talking about how 80% of South Africans identify as Christian, which I'm going to assume they're getting those statistics from the latest census that was done. And one pastor was talking about how if 80% of South Africans are Christian, why aren't we experiencing Christianity in our country, in schools, in malls? And I have some thoughts on that, which hopefully we'll unpack in this episode. But also I'll tell you guys a bit about the inspiration behind the episode title, because I feel like this question, why even call yourself a Christian, is something often directed at someone who is perhaps in the process of deconstructing their faith, or someone whose beliefs do not align with the mainstream, because it is a question I often ask myself. And back in 2019, two Christian YouTube channels had a bit of, I want to say beef, but there was some drama involved between Girl Defined and God is Grey. Now, Girl Defined, some of you may or may not know of them. They're a Christian YouTube channel. I think it's two sisters, and they're promoting very much the evangelical conservative type of Christianity. They've sort of become like the butt of the joke of YouTube. Like, I know I've seen a lot of videos of people reacting to them and making fun of them, and even like commentary channels, some people like coming at it from a what can I say, like an objective point of view, just criticizing them for what they do or what they promote, and other people just see them as this joke, because they do represent a very stereotypical type of Christianity. Like, I don't know if it makes sense, but if you know of them, if you don't, power to you, because you're not really missing out. And then we have God is Grey. Now, I feel like I have talked about God is Grey on some episode, can't remember when, but God is Grey is a channel run by Brenda Marie Davies, and she is an LGBT affirming, sex positive, science believing Christian, right? Progressive. She's been on the journey of deconstruction, and she has made videos clapping back at Girl Defined, or even just pointing out the dangers of the messages that Girl Defined promote. And so obviously these two YouTube channels, both Christian, but from two completely viewpoints, right? And they sometimes get in these, they make response videos to each other. And one time when the God is Grey YouTube channel wanted to sort of speak to Girl Defined and maybe have like a civil conversation, Girl Defined went and had a conference where they were playing God is Grey's videos, and the point they were even like, why even call yourself a Christian? Because I think in that video God is Grey was talking about how she is LGBT affirming, which so that is just a little backstory of where I got the title. Like that, why even call yourself a Christian, it's sort of like become like a meme for some people. I've seen I think, what's the YouTube channel name, Fundi Fridays, I believe. She loves using that little clip as a meme, and I thought it would be fun to call that the title for this episode. And so let us get into the discussion. So one of the questions, I guess, that also comes with this why even call yourself a Christian is, what is a Christian? Like, how would you define a Christian? I think for many people, a Christian would be anyone who is a believer of Jesus Christ, right? Anyone who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ. But I do feel like in today's day and age, there's almost like this checklist, right, of things that sort of determine whether you're a good Christian. Like in the case of Girl Defined, right? For them, if you are LGBT affirming or supporting, you shouldn't even call yourself a Christian, right? I know and one pastor was saying there was a time when whether you smoked or not was like the big thing. I feel like, there are always these things which, I guess, depending on the day and age, depending on the time, people sort of use as like a litmus test to be like, are you Christian enough? Are you a good Christian? Are you a bad Christian? All of that. And this ties in with another question I asked myself, or let me rather say, why I'm sometimes hesitant to call myself a Christian. Now, I will define what Christianity means to me a little bit later, but I do want to sort of speak a bit on like the negatives, or I guess reasons why someone would be hesitant to call themselves a Christian, besides just what other people say, right? Obviously, I have my personal traumas and my personal experiences, which I have discussed in previous episodes. And besides that, I also do think about the harm that Christianity has caused historically through colonization and slavery, and even present day, right? Not only to my community, but to many other communities. And I think I did discuss this in episode 25 of why I left the church. In the episode I also mentioned, I also find that there's so many things which growing up I was taught were fundamental to the Christian faith, which I no longer believe in, because I'm like, okay, because I no longer believe these things, can I still call myself a Christian? Like, why even call myself a Christian, right? Why can't I just be, like many people say, just a spiritual person? But then, right, that's like one hand. But on the other hand, I do sort of wonder, okay, but what does Christianity mean to me? Or what would it mean to be a Christian, right? If I were to say I'm a Christian, what does that mean? Because I could go on about what it doesn't mean, right? But I guess for me it would mean reclaiming a system, or a belief system, that used to mean a lot to me and has sort of become warped, because there was a time where I did feel fully, like I did feel real joy, real passion, right, for this faith. And so sometimes I do sort of want to go back to that, right? But I mean, also I do recognize that there's not really a way that I can go back, but sort of I can find a way to move forward and, figure out for myself what resonates, what is true for me, and what does not serve me, right? Like cutting out what does not serve me at all. As I mentioned, the beliefs I no longer believe, like, one of those beliefs is the idea of hell, and even the fact that Jesus died, and then we died for our sins, and then we have to like say a prayer, and then we'll get out of hell free card, right? Like that whole I don't know what is the theological term for it, but that whole belief, that whole idea of hell and that type of salvation, I no longer believe in it. And I actually found that it has become a lot more freeing in terms of how I navigate faith and spirituality, because now it's like everything, I feel like my intention is a lot more pure, whereas before I felt like everything was driven by a sort of fear and a bit of selfishness, like self-preservation, because it's like, if I don't do all these things, then I'm going to go to hell, right? It's like, if you think about some of the teachings the Bible teaches about, taking care of the poor and the marginalized, I feel like there's a difference between doing it because you're scared that if you don't do these things, you're going to go to hell, and doing it because, it's the right thing to do. And I feel like that has just shifted me into a place of love, right? Where everything is done for the sake of love and not a place of fear, right? Love for my neighbor, love for humanity. And I think even doing it that way, it's sort of like, I feel like it's a more internal, I don't want to say, how can I say, it's more listening to my intuition, listening to my conscious, because I do sometimes feel like in the way that Christianity is practiced in some places or by some individuals, let me say individuals and not generalized communities, but some individuals, it's very performative, right? It's very much showing up on Sundays, looking the part, doing the right things. Even if people see you outside saying all the right things, but behind closed doors, you're a terrible person, right? I think we can perhaps have the conversation about how some people sort of use the fact that they're Christians to sort of, so you assume that they're like a morally good person, right? Like some people, I remember actually, what happened was, I actually remember one time there was an incident where like a student had like a lecturer hitting on them, right, flirting with them, and when the student confronted this lecturer, like, this is what you're making some very inappropriate comments, the lecturer response was, listen here, I'm a pastor, I would not be doing this with students. But literally it's like, but so what were you doing? I think also we think of the unfortunate stories of abuse of power within churches, right, where it's kind of like, if that's the case, it's like, who are you doing this for? Like sometimes I wonder, when people who are pastors or people who are loudly confessing their faith, when they do these atrocious things, like how do you sleep at night? Like, I'm thinking of that Beyonce lyric in Pretty Hurts, where she's like, when you lying in your bed, are you happy with yourself? Right? That's like a genuine question. Like, are you happy with yourself? But yeah, I feel like I'm getting into rambly territory. So let us just get into my final thoughts on this. So firstly, I think it's no one's place to judge another's Christian journey, right? Like, I think, like, Girl Defined, yes, you can disagree with people, right? Disagree with whatever, but I feel like it's not my place to say whether or not she's a real Christian, or she's doing it right or wrong. I think, and this is where I think there's a little bit of nuance to it, but that doesn't mean that I'm just gonna accept whatever she says or whatever they say, right? I think I don't know, the one's lady's name is Bethany. I forgot the other one, but whatever Bethany says, that doesn't mean I'm just gonna be like, oh, because she's a Christian, I'm not gonna judge her. I still can say, but listen, you're perpetuating harm, right? Or your message is harmful, or spreading misinformation, right? I think we still can hold people accountable, right, for their actions, for their words, but whether like your Christian journey, that's kind of like, in a way, none of my business, right? In the same way, like, I wouldn't want someone coming and interrogating me on my faith and trying to judge and see whether I'm doing it right or wrong. But my actions, my words, that obviously I should be held accountable for, is what I'm trying to say. And that brings me on to like my second point, which is that we should rather focus on like the impact of our actions in this life. Like, as I said, the idea of hell, or what happens to after we die, is like, I really don't know, right? I'm at that point, it's like, I don't know what happens when we die. But what I do know is what's happening in this life. What I do know is that in this life, people are dying. In this life, people are suffering. And I feel like the way some people practice their Christianity, they focus so much more on the afterlife. Like, everything is all about the afterlife. But what are you doing now, right? The people around you now, like, what difference can you make in their lives? Because in many ways, I do think that some people are living hell right now, right? Right now here on earth, I'm like, this is hell, right? In the same way, I think we can also bring heaven to people here on earth. We can experience heaven here on earth. I mean, the Lord's Prayer says, our Father art in heaven, hallowed be thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So I think that is the mandate of Christians. And then my final point is that we shouldn't be afraid to question things and also redefine them. I think that in also, as I meant, like, letting go of my fear of hell, what happens after death, that's given me the courage to question things. That's given me the courage to sort of examine the things. And funny enough, I was in church recently with my family, and the pastor was talking about how we should have a childlike faith, and how how they say with children you could tell them literally anything and they'll just believe you, right? And he was saying that Christians sometimes we try to justify what we'll read the Bible, instead of just believing the Bible for what it is, we try to make all these rationalizations and excuses, and we should all have a childlike faith and just believe it as it is, which I find that to be a little bit dangerous, because it's like, is this assuming that the Bible is inerrant? Which, that's a whole different conversation. But for me, I think that having a childlike faith is also being inquisitive and curious. Because there's one, like, if you've been with like a child, especially when they like the toddler preschool stage, they love to ask why. That's the thing about your children. Yes, they can like kind of believe things that don't make sense, but I feel like the thing also children is they're not afraid to ask questions, right? Like I feel like it's another thing with children is they're so bold. Like they'll ask you like, "Mommy, why is this like that? Daddy, why is this like this? Like uncle, brother, like why is this?" They ask all these questions, which I think as we become older, we sort of lose that carefree freedom and just curiosity, right? I think now my approach to anything, and not just like religion or spirituality, like I try to be very much curious, like why are things like this, and sort of think through it and process. And even with, like I mentioned, the point of redefining things, right? There's certain practices which I've had to sort of rename, right? Like sometimes I'll be saying I'm meditating, which, you know, someone else would be like, okay, this is just prayer. Like that's just a very simple example. Like there are other things which I've just had to give it a new name, simply because the name that this thing was called while I was in church, you know, it's just, it comes with a lot of trauma. But then just redefining it in my own way, and in a way that makes sense to me, in a way that brings me peace, it's just another practice that I've been, you know, incorporating. And so yeah, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much if you made it till this point, and I love you guys so much. And yeah, can't wait to hear from you guys in the next one, or you like maybe you'll see me on YouTube. And also, by the way, yeah, feel free to reach out to me at Simply Sfisa on Instagram and Twitter, though Instagram is where I am more active. But yeah, until the next one, I love you so much. Bye guys.